Hello everyone, it's Miss Darling in the studio. Welcome back, and if you're here for the first time, I'm happy to have you. Always happy to have everyone who comes and watches, and I do hope you'll glean something useful for yourself that will help you in your own personal creativity. So today's topic is stamps, and I'm going to be going into briefly different kinds of stamps that are available for purchase, but also how you can make your own stamps. So the first part will be just an intro, and then we'll get into an actual stamp making tutorial. So welcome, and if you like the content, please give it a like and share it so that others can enjoy it as well. All right. Now, most of you are probably already familiar with lots of stamps that are on the market that you can purchase. And in the old days, we would get rubber stamps that have a wooden backing to them to make it easy to do our stamping. And so you can see here's a large one, and then these are part of a set of numbers that each number has its own individual wood backing. And so, that's real handy. But, that was kind of the more older type of stamp making. And now what's probably a lot more popular is the silicone stamp. Here you can see this is a plastic sheet that goes on top that shows you what the stamps are, and then the silicone stamps are adhered to another piece of plastic, and so you just pull them off as you need them. And with the silicone stamps, you'll probably want to get an acrylic block to adhere them to. This takes the place of the wood block that's on the old-fashioned rubber stamps, and so you would just pull your acrylic off and attach it to the acrylic block, and that makes it real easy to ink it and then stamp it where you want. And particularly nice because you can see through the acrylic, which is lined. That helps you line it up so you get it straight, whereas opposed to the wood block, you can't see through that, so you have to just really guess at your positioning. And so that's why I always prefer the acrylic generally over the rubber stamps. The problem that I have seen over the years with the acrylic stamps is particularly if you live in a area that is hot, maybe high humidity. I don't know if it's the heat or the humidity, but I have seen my acrylic stamps, some of them melt and get real sticky and gluey, and of course I don't like that, and they become pretty much unusable. So that's one of the downsides. You have to be careful how you store them, because you don't want them to go bad on you. And so you can see here I've got a series of acrylic stamps with really tall lettering, and they come on a large sheet like this. I didn't have it sitting on the table because the acrylic sheeting causes glare, and we don't like glare. But anyway, you can see that they come in all different types, and you just have to hunt around either at your local supplier store or online, and you'll find lots of different sources for stamps. Now back to the rubber stamps. I talked about the rubber stamps that come on a wood block. You can also get them without a block, And so you can tell this is much thinner and would be a little more difficult to use. I have tried to adhere these to an acrylic block to help me stamp, and sometimes they will stick and sometimes they won't. So there's this type as well. Be very careful when purchasing these without an automatic backing, because you can see, hopefully this will, maybe turn it that way. You can see how thin the rubber is. And so if you don't have anything on that, I made the mistake of buying some where I got just the rubber itself. And oh my, trying to stamp with them was really a headache, and I had to create my own blocks to adhere them to so that I could use them. So obviously they are cheaper when you don't purchase them attached to a surface of some sort. These are only about a quarter of an inch thick, the backing, and then the rubber itself is about an eighth of an inch thick. So it doesn't give you a whole lot of places to grip onto it. They probably were cheaper to buy. So now you can also buy foam stamps, and here's some examples. It's kind of hard to see because they're, this solid black, but hopefully you can see that there's a design that's been etched into this. Now these are laser cut, and so they're very precise and precision, but you need to be careful how you store them because it is foam and it is crushable. And so, buyer beware. But anyway, these are very lightweight, and the jury is still out as far as I'm concerned on how much I like these. They're not really any less expensive than other types of stamps. Of course, I suppose they're easier for creators to hook up with a company that makes these and create their own designs and make them available for purchase. And that's probably an easier route for a creator to go who wants to, create their own designs and use them than the typical silicone or rubber process. But I have found, especially in the larger stamps, it's just ever so much more difficult when you're actually stamping because they are so lightweight that when you're pressing down on them, for me anyway, it's a lot easier to ever so slightly move one end or the other. And of course, the moment there's any movement at all, you get kind of a sloppy reproduction. And so, you have to, bear that in mind and maybe restrict your buying of these to the smaller sizes that are easier to handle. So now, the last category are felt stamps, and these you can make yourself for practically no investment at all, and I will get into that a little later in the video. But you can see I have quite a few here. This is just a sample of what I've made, and they're very easy to make. They do not hold up as long, and they tend to be a little bit fuzzy. You're not going to get real super clean lines with this type of stamp, but it just depends on what you want to use them for. Now, in the tutorial, I'm going to show you how I've made a number of rubber stamps that work very nicely for me. But again, because they are handmade, you're not going to get a real sleek, clean line. So you need to be willing to have something that's a little more grungy in the final reproduction than you would if you purchased a machine-made, manufactured stamp like this. When they're cut with machines, whether they're laser or some other process, you're going to get something that's crisp and clean. When you hand make it, you're not. So with that said, let's get into making some of our own and have some fun. Okay, before we get into making some stamps, let me show you how I've made use of the ones that I've made so far. Here you can see a couple of large stamps that I made that, very time consuming and a little rough on the fingers after a while. So when you start and you want to make rubber stamps, you have to start with a plain rubber block. They are, I believe, 4x6. Let me just check that. 4x6, and I found them on Amazon. So it came in a box. I think I got about 12 of them. And so, if you buy in a quantity, you can save a little bit on each one. But you need to, decide ahead of time, are you going to make a lot of stamps or are you going to just make, a few? And then let that be your guide as to how much raw material you purchase. So you get the blank rubber blocks, and then I drew my designs out on tissue paper, and then because I couldn't find any of my carbon paper, I took a pencil and then put graphite all over the back of my design, flipped it over, and then retraced my design right onto the rubber. That was good enough to help as a guide for when I went to cut. Whether you go over it again on the rubber itself to make it more plain where you're to cut away, that's up to you. But this is just how I did it. And one thing I want to mention, that in these designs, it did not matter whether I was using the positive side or the reverse side of my design. But if you've got numbers or letters or anything that must go in a specific direction, then what you need to do is make your design and then reverse it. Now, whether you reverse it on a computer or some other method, that I'll leave up to you to decide. I took my drawn design, I scanned it into my computer, and then flipped it in my Photoshop editing software. You might not have that. You may have to go somewhere and have someone reverse it for you. But if you don't reverse it, for instance, if it's a number that's directional, or, like, where's a piece of paper when you need it? Okay, if I'm doing a letter and I have the letter A, it's the same on both sides. The left is a mirror image of the right. But if I did the letter C, that's very directional. So this particular letter would have to be put on, cut into the stamp in reverse. Otherwise, it's going to come out like this when you stamp it. And the same goes for numbers. Like the number 1 is just, you don't have to reverse that. But if you did the number 3, that's directional. So that would have to be reversed. Otherwise, it's going to come out looking like this. So I hope that makes sense. Now, let me just show you real quick how some of my designs have been used effectively. For instance, this is one of my favorite stamps that I made, which is just a series of rough cut circles. And, all I had to do on this was cut around each circle and I had my stamp. Well, how do I use that for my journals? Here's how I can print those off. Here's some circles where the middle was plain. But you see, I can use various inks on my stamp and get quite a few different feelings. And, it just depends on what color I'm doing. Here's where I printed it out multiple times on some brown pre-printed paper. I've just got lots of different things in here, and these are great to tear up or cut up to use as ephemera in your journals. And you can see I've got lots of things. These are all from handmade stamps. And so you can see, let's get further into this. These are not stamps, those are done with a brush. Okay, but here's that chevron design that I showed you earlier, and printed on either, I think I did a coffee dye on the paper before I printed. You can see, I think I went over this. It came out a bit faint, so, it came out looking a bit more mottled like this. And, you can always go back over something with an ink pen. Here I'm using different colors of inks. And you can see that there's, just a wide variety. And then here's the design of squares that I also made. And this is how it turned out. And so it gives you a lot of variety in how you can use them. And, here's some more colored imagery of smaller ephemera designs that I made. And, I do a lot of things of a Japanese nature or a tribal type. Okay, now I kept in these small envelopes some of my planned work and trying to keep things in an organized manner. So the first thing I did with the calligraphy is I printed off calligraphy from the computer and enlarged it to about the size that I wanted to reproduce. Now, these are all the positive side of the image, and I wrote on them not only the translation, this is the kanji for the word creation, but I also notated which side is up. because sometimes it become, even though I grew up in Japan and I'm very familiar with a lot of this, sometimes even I have no idea which side is up. So I give myself an arrow, also the translation. Now let's see. These are patterns. Okay. These were the positive side. Okay. So I keep them together. And then I have an envelope where I keep the reverse. So you don't want to get them mixed together. And so this is the reverse of a kanji that is in one of my other envelopes. And I did the same with this. I put an arrow there to show which side is up, and I wrote the translation down. Now, this one you can see I've already done. I wrote the word done there, so I wouldn't duplicate it. But I can also tell it was done because the image itself is very scribbled on. And you can see where I used the pencil to put graphite on the back to then be able to transfer it to the rubber. Okay, so I'm going to be picking from this stack today to, maybe I'll just easier to work from the back, because you can tell in an instant what's been done and what hasn't been done. So I already have stamps of anything that has graphite on the back. So here's what I have to choose from. This means dream. Here we have smile. Oh, that's been done. Dream. This has been done. That's been done. And here's another. Okay, so there's two different kanji for the word dream. And so I've done this one already. So I think I'll do this one today. I can see I need to make reverse images of some of the other things that I have as I'm beginning to run out. Okay, so I have my design here, and put those away. So here's the other, I think this was it here. I believe this is the other kanji for dream. And yeah, so on the back, after I get it made, I write the word dream, and again I'll put an arrow there just to make sure I always know which side is up. And you can see that after you ink up one of your stamps, you can see where you've cut away, and we'll go into that in a minute. But if it looks real grungy and you've got ink there, that means you need to cut away a little bit more of the background, unless you're okay with having it look more grungy. But this one probably should be cleaned up a little bit before I use it again. Here you can see there's not too much there's not too much grunge on the outside of these circles. I could maybe go in and clean up the shapes a little if I want, but I'm okay with it looking, you know, completely handmade. Here's a couple of other types of circles. I do use a lot of circles in my ephemera, and so you can see I made these because, you know, if you like a particular style or subject matter and you hunt and you can't find what you want, then just make it. And the nice thing about making it is excuse me, the nice thing about making it is you can make it whatever size you want, and you can make whatever variations you want, and then have fun using them. And you don't really need to worry about these rubber stamps deteriorating on you, and or you know, getting crushed or harmed in some way. They are more cumbersome and heavy to store than other types, but I actually prefer them overall when it comes to what I hand make. I prefer this method. It's more traditional, and I just feel a greater sense of accomplishment when I get one of these made as to opposed to like a felt stamp. So here's my design, and you can see that it's pretty intricate. So I need to open up my package of my you can't save these envelopes if you don't destroy them. You can't get the rubber out. And I do recommend buying rubber that is at least, I think, about 3/8 inches wide. Thick, I should say. It's 4x6 in dimension, and then about 3/8 of an inch thick. And the reason you want it at least this thick is that it gives you plenty of depth to hang on to when you're actually using it. If you get any thinner than that, then your fingernails start getting in the way, and it's just more problematic. So make sure you buy what you're looking for thick enough. You will need a blade of some kind so you can cut your rubber. There's no sense in making your rubber too much bigger than your design. That's just a waste of rubber, and you know, you want to be careful of that. I'm going to remove this so I can cut on my grungy background instead of my nice new background. So I try to go about 1/4 of an inch wider all around. You'll need to put a little bit of muscle into that, but they're not too difficult to cut. And I'm going to take away the excess because I could make a small stamp out of that. Okay, now I still have some waste here, and if I don't cut it off, then I'm just going to have to scrape, cut the rubber down, which is more work, and it's just wasted effort and wasted rubber. I often will take some of these small pieces, and you can get a really small design cut out of that, or you can just use the triangular shape as, a stamp in its own right. So I don't throw anything away. You never know when you're going to find it useful. So let's see whether I want to cut away any more here. Okay. Now, first thing I have to do is put some graphite on the back. And you can, kind of hold this up to a light to see exactly where your design is, so you make sure you get all of it covered with your graphite. Like I say, if I could only find my carbon paper, I could use carbon paper, but this works fine. It does tend to rub off onto the rubber as you're working with it, and that kind of makes your stamp a bit messy, but I don't know how else to tell you. Now, I just got through sharpening all of my pencils, and I'm afraid they'll break if I try to use them. And I don't want to break them, so I'm trying to see if I've got some other tools here. I bought a bunch of tools for this purpose, and then they did not turn out to be as useful as I hoped they would be. But we'll try. Here's one with a little thicker knob on the end. I'm sure there are tools that you can buy that are for this specific purpose. I had this tool here, which is pretty much the only one I use, which was from my days when I was working with clay and making home decor objects out of clay and firing them and so on and so forth. So if you've got some clay making tools from some time in your past, those can work very nicely. This is a I have no idea what it's used for, but hopefully you can see there's a round nub right here on the end. So I'm going to try and use that to transfer the design onto my rubber. And I'm just going to press along the outside of each section, and I'm going to color it in so that I can see the exact shape. Like I say, you could do this with a pen or, you know, a pencil that's not got a sharp point on it because you don't want to tear your paper, but you want to be able to press with a certain amount of pressure on the image to get it to transfer dark enough so you can see it. See how smudgy that is? This is going to be a little bit hard to read. Obviously, if you have a design or a, whatever it is you choose to do, the bigger the shape, the more simple the design, the easier it is to reproduce. I've been doing this a while, so I will tackle some of these more intricate shapes of calligraphy. But when you're new, I suggest you start out with, designs that are less complex, because I want you to have a successful make, and so you don't get discouraged. Work with something simple first until you really get the hang of it, and then you can more easily transition to more intricate designs. I think I did a lot of smudging just by moving this paper around on top of the rubber, and I think that's why I got such a mottled. So what I do in a situation like this is then just visually I will try to give myself a new outline, an exact replica of what I printed off, but it'll be close enough and to do what I need it to do. Do not look for perfection. The only way you would get perfection is if it's machine made. But, where are you going to get something like this machine made? The only ones in calligraphy that you can buy ready-made are, their kanji that's very popular, very commercialized, and generally the type of words or sentiments that I don't care for because of that. I mean, it's easy to find all sorts of calligraphy that'll say long life or love, and, things like that. And that's not, what I'm looking for. So I really do have one-of-a-kind stamps. So so I don't forget, I'm going to go ahead and write my translation on the back. And my arrow. And see what I also did on this, I put an R down here. next to the word dream so that I knew instantly this particular design was in the reverse. So, you know, make sure you notate, because especially on something like this, you know, you're not likely to be able to tell the difference between the positive side and the reverse side. Okay, so now I've got my design. You don't have to fill that in. Eventually that's, you know, the design itself is going to be covered in ink. But what we want to do is we've got to cut away all of the background. And that's what we're going to use this tool to do, is we're going to just carefully, and I said, you know, one of the reasons you don't want to start out doing something this intricate is because I've got to cut into all these little nooks and crannies as carefully as I can. And one slip of my tool to cut something too far or too close to the other side can ruin the whole thing. So you have to be really careful, because if you miscut your design, then, you know, you have to pretty much throw it away if you want it to be precise. So I'm going to start on the outer edge here. Let me see about getting in close, a bit closer. Okay. And I'm going to just come right up alongside that outline. And I usually kind of like to go around the perimeter and carefully cut away right up next to the line as I can, and carefully do that without being distracted by anything else, so that I hopefully can make sure I preserve those edges, and so I don't overcut down the road. There are tools that you can get that are smaller than this particular one for doing more detailed work. And I believe I have one somewhere. I don't know where it is. It's in my drawer there somewhere, and this cutting edge here is smaller and narrower, and would help me to get into really tight spaces. So when I get to that point, I'll probably go looking for it for this one, because I do have some really small spaces I need to get into. Okay, I've pretty well got most the design pretty well cut out. What I need to do now is to take some of the more of the background areas that are away from the design itself and kind of cut them down so that I don't get little ridges when I go to use the stamp. And so I'm going to clean it up a little bit first, and then we'll stamp it and see how it comes out. Okay, let's see what we get. Not bad. It's a little crumbly right up in here. I'll maybe clean up a little bit of that, but I'm real pleased with that. I'm picking up a line here, which is right over here. You can see because it's got a little ink on it, so we'll get rid of that. And yeah, this is pretty clean, if I say so myself. When you go cleaning up, you know, little bits, you know, just be really, really careful, because one slip, and, you know, if it's something you can live with, don't bother cleaning it up. You know, just keep it rough and grungy. Better to do that than, you know, to cut away too much and be sorry. Okay, I think I'm going to call it done, at least for now. And so let's just kind of compare a little bit and see what improvements we've made. Well, I didn't get as good a job inking, but I was able to clean up this a little bit better there, and make this a little more rounded there, and clean up a little bit right up in here, and up in there. Let's try that one more time. Didn't get quite enough ink on that, but I'm quite happy with how this stamp has come out. Okay, so now I've got another customized kanji stamp that means dream. Kind of a nice sentiment to include in a journal, regardless of what style it is. So I hope you get a good idea of what you can do. And so I'm just going to quickly cover felt stamps. These circle stamps are just, you use a pencil to just draw right on your felt. And I recommend you get white felt instead of black. But here I made the design, cut it out of the white felt, and then glued that to a black backing piece just to give me a little bit of depth there to make it easier to print with and to, make it a little more sturdy. And this is just regular little sheets of felt that I bought at Walmart for pennies. And so these circular stamps were made easily. Just, draw it on, cut it out, and glue it to a backing. Now these have gotten a little bit faded, and that's one of the problems with working with the felt. What you do is you take your design and you draw it on with a pencil, and you draw it, you press in hard enough to make a crease in the felt. I think it's felt. It's not felt, it's a foam. It's a thin piece of foam. I glued two together here using some double-sided tape to give me a little more thickness. So you just take a pencil and, draw your design in and press in hard enough to, make a crease there. And that's all there is to it. Now, over time, as you use it and as time goes by, the creases that you make start to disappear a little bit. In other words, they're not as deep a groove, and therefore they don't turn out as well as they did when you first made them. So, you just take your pencil and go in and reinforce the groove. Of course, once you do that, you lose sight of where the design was. But that's all this is. It's just taking a pencil and going around and literally drawing right into the foam. Not as good as the machine-made foam stamps. Now, in this case, I just took some of my leftover geometric shapes that I cut away, and I glued them onto another flat piece of foam. I think I used glue. You could even maybe use double-sided tape to adhere them. And then because it wasn't thick enough, I put another piece of foam on the back of that using double-sided tape, so that I got a little bit more thickness there to make it easier to work with and to make it a little more sturdy. But this gives you an interesting design shape, just doing something as simple and basic as that. So let's take a look at how these come out. You see how they're even in the best case scenario. I mean, I didn't get enough ink on it, but even then you can see how blotchy this type of stamp comes out. Let's try this one here, see what we get. And put a little more ink on that this time. Now it's pretty easy on these to also get a ghost print. That I can, you know, that was the first one, and then I can just drop over here and, you know, throw in another one. It's going to be lighter, but you can still get an image. And maybe you want something really soft and in the background on a page or something. So that's where these can come in handy. Dirt cheap to make. It's just the cost of your foam sheets and maybe some double-sided tape, and you're in business. You know, scissors. I think I used, you know, little clippers to cut the foam out. And then lastly, you can buy thicker chunks of foam, you know, a much thicker. This is a good 1/2 inch. Let's see, almost 3/4 inch thick. Obviously that's going to be really easy to work with. As far as design goes, there's just no end to what you can create, and it's just dependent on your own personal creativity and what you like, and whether you're, you know, whether it's worth going to the work and expense and effort to make something all of your own. So if you enjoyed this content, please give the video a like and share it, and leave me a comment. Maybe you've made the stamps before, so if you've got some tips, put them in the comment box and share with everybody, and I would be grateful for that. And so yeah, that's it for this video. This is Miss Darling calling this a wrap. Bye-bye.